Fingers crossed, gonna make some numbers for a 6-cylinder. Welcome back to another video. So today we've come over to see Cutthroat Racing Mark III Caddy van with an R32 turbo, hoping to get around 550, 600 horsepower plus. This is going to be the start of a little thing we're going to do quite regular. Is I'm going to be coming over to EFI Parts on a regular basis to see and film all the interesting cars they're mapping on the dyno. So let's dive in. So we're just loading onto the dyno. R32 engine out of an Audi TT, not DSG, still H pattern, fully forged, JE rods, JE pistons, Supertech valves. It's on a 71mm turbo made by Mamba. Mamba is basically a manufacturer from China, but again, seeing the China turbos doing very well. Like Pulsar, turbos have come a long way in China. It's on 2200cc injectors and it is on E85 fuel. What happened previously with the car, why it's arranged at Chris's, it got to a certain power previously by another mapper. The rest was supposed to be done on strip. I don't think that's happened, so obviously come over to basically get Chris's advice to set some other stuff up, remap the car, try and get more power, because with the size of turbo and the forged engine, it should technically make 650. That's the number I'm guessing, around the 650 mark, maybe a smidge more, who knows. So let's start with the dyno and fingers crossed we'll make the numbers and have no problems. So what we're doing now is we've done a lot of the low down stuff. We've only got a 10-litre tank in the car, so it's only a small tank. So it's a quick stop, put some 10 litres in, start again increasing some of the power limits and start dialing it in, and then fingers crossed we'll start ramping, boosting and start making some numbers. So previously on the previous dyno I think it saw 500, which technically it should make a lot more, because what we're seeing is at under a bar 12 psi we're seeing I think 360 horsepower. So before you know it, you put ice in it because it's on a charge cooler, it's running E85 fuel, ramp some boosting, ramp some ice in, we should see some good numbers. So to put it in perspective on the ice part, we did a video with Scott and his V6 turbo Corsa. Just by putting ice in the charge cooler, not just water, it picked up 20 horsepower. And we're not even at a bar of boost, so this will run probably 2.2, 2.5 bar of boost. So it's going to be some good numbers and it's looking like it could be a good day. So what we're seeing is, so people understand this, obviously this is obviously the power graph, but what we're struggling with is it's having a revving fault. So it would stop at 6,003 and it'll stop revving, but obviously we want this to rev to like 7.3, 7.5, and we're trying to find out why it's having this intermittent fault. We think possibly crank sensor or something like that. So we're just messing around, but as you can see, 416 already. So there's loads and loads to go. Obviously there's some kind of triggering issue, which we'll have a mess with now, and Chris will work his magic, and I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of it and figure out what's going on.
Try it. Yeah.
So we've just swapped for the replacement crank sensor. See if that sorts the fault. See if we can rev it a bit cleaner. Because again, so we've replaced the new crank sensor, still having the same issue. But what we've found is previous experience with other ECUs, sometimes not polarity conscious. If you look at the wiring diagrams, they can run either way. But sometimes with these aftermarket ECUs, if you get them a specific way, it'll stop you from revving, which we supposedly, from talking to the lads who have been here, have seen with like a Link ECU in the previously. So we're just going to try and switch the polarity, see whether that fixes the fault and allows us to rev all the way through. Changed the polarity, which hasn't worked. This is obviously the crank sensor. The gap between this face and that edge sits next to the trigger wheel, but we think the gap's too big for the factory settings, so we're grinding some off this face here, this face, so then it'll bring the sensor further into the trigger wheel, so at high RPM you won't lose signal. Very, very, very common on this style of sensor, which the Vauxhalls run and looks like this VW runs. Best way to go is an external trigger wheel, but not a lot of us do that. We're trying to try this, and then fingers crossed we'll be able to hit more RPM and we can carry on. I say we're just struggling with this crank sensor. So we're still having the crank sensor fault, and it is progressively getting worse to the point of sometimes you can hit 4,000 RPM, sometimes it's only letting you go to 2,000 RPM. Put the oscilloscope on, basically make sure that the trigger wheel isn't bent, isn't out of line. So basically we're seeing the right amount of teeth and the right amount of gap for the trigger wheel. Last try before calling it. May have found the nerve a bit loose, but we're grasping at straws. We're trying anything. Last go. Let's see what happens. That seems to, fingers crossed, fixed it. Potentially a loose earth, seems to rev through, but again, as I said previously, it was a big mix and match, so sometimes it'd rev to 7, sometimes it'd stop at 4, so we've got it past 7, let's see what happens. So we're second pulling, still seems to be good, literally a minute loose earth bolt, and you're talking you have to really shove it to get it to move, but again at 6,000-7,000 RPM the vibration through that card is unreal, so we can only surmise at this moment, fingers crossed, the earth was a bit vibrating, losing signal. So we're cracking on, we're just topping up with fuel, so we are at around 400 horsepower at a bar of boost. Still ice to go in. Should start coming good now. We can start putting some ice in, we can start putting some boost in, start putting some timing in. Fingers crossed, gonna make some numbers for a 6-cylinder. We are now at, I think, 17 PSI, which is just over the bar of boost. Bar of boost is 14, just in like 570. So what I guess is happening, and what Chris is doing is, because the ECU has boost by gear, he'll be setting different PSI rates to work out different power in different gears. Because you need to set, like, I don't know, first gear at 500 horsepower, second gear at 600 horsepower. So I would guess he's going through the different PSIs in steps rather than ramping it all in. Looking at the Audi numbers it's making, it's going to make some big numbers. I would guess 7s, I would like to think. 664 for 23 PSI. See it to the 7s, should see it, awesome, happy man. So that made 684 at 26 PSI. Still some bits of timing to put in, still some fettling, but I'm convinced it's going to make it to the 7s. Obviously, you probably will have seen previously, the owner's well over the moon. That's technically the turbo out of puff. What we see is you've had a little bit more PSI, it's not gaining much, so technically the turbo's not doing no more, and there's no point leaning on it any more than we need to. So it's made 777, but I can't remember the torque, 550 I think torque, which pretty impressive for a car. We think they made 500 previously, so it's going to be a night and day difference for having a 500 and a 770 horsepower car. So Chris is now going to clean up a few bits, set all the background settings like launch control, the boost by gear, finesse some of that, and then that's us done. We're also out of ice in the ice box, and what we are finding is the ice box is super sensitive. Gains 10 degrees of temperature in the ice box, it loses 10 horsepower. That's how sensitive this engine is to ice. I think we're going to call it a night. We're going to probably tidy a few bits up, but we'll see. But I think that's us done. So what an interesting day. It's been a long day, to be fair. A lot of fault finding, a lot of chasing, but obviously persevered. Chris persevered through, tried to diagnose as much as he could, and we finally got there with just a simple fix on an earth lead. Just shows that something so tiny can make such a big problem. You know, 770 horsepower in a front wheel drive Caddy is going to be certainly a handful. And the VW DRC. I hope you enjoyed that. We'll carry on following this at the track because he's always there when we're racing. So we hope you enjoyed something different. And fingers crossed there'll be more from the dyno coming with some more interesting cars in the future with Chris at EFI Parts. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you all on the next video.